So the De'Aaron Fox has already been traded to the Spurs. The Golden State Warriors have changed their mind. Jimmy Butler is still trying to find a way to get out of Miami. And the trade of the century just occurred a couple of days ago when the Dallas Mavericks sent Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I know I say this pretty often if you've been following me on YouTube for some years now, but I truly mean it this time. This is going to be the craziest trade deadline in NBA history. And crazy enough, that still may not do it any justice whatsoever or what may occur in the next about 24 to 36 hours. Because for those who are unaware, there has been a lot of new updates with trade rumors over the past 2 to 3 days, especially post the Luka Doncic transaction. And so I deem it necessary to make an update video to get you prepared for what you can expect in the next day and a half. Now, I normally don't do this, but I just want to give you a heads up. When the deadline is going on tomorrow, I will be live streaming on playback.tv/Lowe's Room, where not only will I be live streaming the trade deadline and all the transactions that are happening in real time, but also I stream live NBA games like 3 to 4 times a week on that platform as well. So go check me out over there. But if not, at bare minimum, check me out on the trade deadline because I do believe it will be one for the history books. Now, with that out of the way, let's get right into the rumors because boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Now, first, let's talk about the Golden State Warriors because the news that's been going out for the Warriors over the past 2 to 3 days is crazy. As we all know, the Warriors in the first 2 to 3 months of the season and even heading into the regular season was steadfast on the idea of not making any significant changes to their roster whatsoever. They really believed to not leverage their future for what's going on right now because they didn't believe that any of the changes were going to be significant enough. And that idea has just completely fallen on its face, especially because Kuminga and B-Pots have not been able to live up to expectations. And now we find ourselves 50 games into the regular season. The Warriors are a 500 ball club, indie play-in in a very competitive Western Conference, and offensively they are horrible in large part because of how much they just overly depend on a 36-year-old Steph Curry. And because of the underwhelming season, we are now talking about a team that went from untouchables across the board on their roster to now they're willing to call any and everyone to try to make a deal done. Originally, they were in the Zach LaVine sweepstakes, but pulled out to go get Jimmy Butler. Then Jimmy Butler claimed that he wasn't willing to sign a long-term deal. And now all of a sudden, they're trying to get Kevin Durant. Yes, that's crazy. As crazy as it sounds, they're trying to get KD. And even if they fail at getting Kevin Durant, there are multiple reports claiming that the Warriors are on the phone with every team in the NBA that has an all-star caliber player that they're willing to move, and everyone on the roster, except for Steph Curry, is expendable. Man, what a change of events. Complete 180. In all honesty, I don't blame the Warriors whatsoever. This season has been very depressing for anyone who was a Warriors fan to sit here and watch this franchise completely swing and miss and just piss away every opportunity to add a legitimate co-star next to Curry, in particular on the offensive side of the floor, has to be frustrating. And to see them now get to this point where they are finally coming to the revelation where they have to make this move, again, maybe even more frustrating than the fact that they didn't make the transaction earlier, because now you're starting to run out of options and you're looking at effectively trying to get potentially Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram, or even having very, very lofty expectations of trying to get in Kevin Durant. Now, do I believe that's going to occur? It's going to be very, very difficult to do so, especially because KD makes a ridiculous amount of money and the Suns are a second tax apron team, so it makes it even more difficult to move someone like Kevin Durant on the roster. But the simple fact that the Warriors have now changed their tone and started to redirect in a different direction, it does really say a lot about how bad this season has been for a team that is trying their best to maximize the last couple of years of Curry's career. But even with all that being said, the most interesting part of this conversation isn't the fact that the Warriors are starting to shift gears and starting to make some transactions, because in all honesty, that's the obvious route to go. What's way more interesting is the fact that Kevin Durant's name is being brought into these conversations, so much so that there's even a trade floating around, the idea of moving Jimmy Butler, KD, a part of a 3 or 4 team trade where the Warriors would land Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler will find himself in Phoenix, one of the teams that he is very adamant on moving to, and quite frankly, probably the only team that he is willing to move to, because there are several opportunities where he could have been traded by now, but he's effectively declined the opportunity of doing so because he doesn't want to sign long-term for the Warriors or the Memphis Grizzlies, which in and of itself is another video, but I'm not going to go down that path. Again, the reason why this is so interesting is that KD is being brought into this conversation. For those who may not be aware, KD is having another really great season, one of the best shot creators in the NBA. Shooting splits across the board are really, really great. However, it's not really translating into any lasting impact. Sure, when he's on the floor, the Suns look solid, but it's not translating into enough wins, as the Suns, very similar to the Warriors, underwhelming, finding themselves at best in a play-in situation. And I really don't know how much longer Phoenix can just underperform and be underwhelming at this stage of Kevin Durant's career, especially because KD only has one more year left on his deal after this season, and after that, he can just do whatever he wants to. And so there is a world where I could see where the Suns, in an attempt to try to salvage a potential Kevin Durant departure, where they leaves them completely naked of any type of talent and trying to continue to build in a direction that can leave them competitive, I can see them making a trade to get slightly younger, or potentially what they should be doing, restructuring to get themselves not only younger, but as much draft capital as possible. Because if you do trade KD, inevitably you're more than likely just going to blow this up, even if you get someone like Jimmy Butler that in theory keeps you competitive. Because I just don't see how this team is going to be able to stamp themselves into conversations to be title contenders anytime soon. And when that day comes, we all have to acknowledge that Bradley Beal contract has to be the worst in the NBA, because the only reason why the Suns would even entertain the idea of trading Kevin Durant is because they know for a fact they can't make any other improvements to the roster because of how much money Beal is making and the fact that he has a no trade clause, so he's not going anywhere. But more importantly, what does this mean for Devin Booker? And this is where I find all of this really fascinating, because we now have several teams in the NBA who have a plethora of draft picks, some young players as well, that can throw at a Phoenix Suns team that has little to no draft assets because they traded all of it to go get Kevin Durant. And because how underwhelming this has all been, I just have a hard time believing that Devin Booker is going to want to stay on this team long term if they decided to pivot and shift in a different direction that does not consist of Kevin Durant being on his team. And again, even if he is on his roster, it's only a matter of time before Phoenix decides to just blow it up, get as many draft assets in the process, and try to just rebuild with whatever they have in return for a Devin Booker trade. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen now, but I do believe if you are entertaining the idea of trading Kevin Durant, then you probably should also be entertaining the idea of trading Devin Booker as well. And in my opinion, they should just do it this deadline, because there's just no rhyme or reason for them to sustain or keep anything that they have going for themselves, because it's clearly not legitimate, it's not real, and it's going nowhere really, really fast. And this is where a team like the Spurs come into play, all their draft capital, and the fact that they have a bunch of young players that they didn't have to move off of to get De'Aaron Fox. Moving forward, you can have a team that features De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, and Victor Wembanyama. That right there is a crazy trio, and I do believe they work way better than what Devin Booker has found himself in over the past couple of years out in Phoenix. And even if not with San Antonio, Houston has a bunch of draft capital as well. Actually, they have Phoenix's draft picks, so that will be very interesting. But I do find it very interesting what OKC could potentially do, especially if this postseason run doesn't translate to the level of success that they are anticipating. Not saying that they should immediately give up on J-Dub, but you know, a lot of people may forget that Devin Booker is still fairly young. He's still in his 20s. I think he's only 2 years older than SGA. And I do believe if you pair SGA with Devin Booker, Chet Holmgren, and all of those other defenders, it does just completely throw that OKC team into conversations that I have a hard time believing any other team in the NBA will be able to compete with anytime soon. So there's a bunch of teams that have the assets to go after someone like Devin Booker when the Suns finally are ready to completely hit the restart button. And if you're talking about trading Kevin Durant, that is sooner than later. Also, players to apparently keep in mind in terms of the Warriors trading for someone, not only do you have Jimmy Butler, but apparently there's some rumors about Brandon Ingram and Nikola Vucevic as well, all of which are very interesting and fascinating to say the least. Now, moving on to another team, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. As we all know, the Lakers traded Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic, the trade of the century. So what exactly does this mean for the Lakers moving forward? Well, this team clearly needs to bring in a 5-man. The Lakers are already looking for a 5-man to place next to Anthony Davis before the trade, but at this point, it's almost mandatory. The only big that they have in rotation right now is Jackson Hayes, and then after that, it gets really, really thin in that front court. And Hayes, coming as a Laker fan, trust me when I say he's not ready for the starting role in the NBA. So I still believe that the Lakers are probably going to prioritize players like Nick Claxton and Miles Turner. I would go as far as to say someone like Nick Claxton is probably going to be even more prioritized. And originally, there may have been some hesitation about getting Nick Claxton because of his fit alongside Anthony Davis, but at this point, more than likely, the Lakers are going to run a 4-out, 1-in centric type of offense now that Luka's on the team. And because they're going to move in a direction where Luka's a ball handler playing alongside LeBron, because it doesn't really seem like LeBron is going to be moved anytime soon. Matter of fact, there's a lot of people who are claiming that LeBron may even play another year or two longer because Luka's on the roster, just to participate in this development of who Luka is as a Laker long term. And if that's the case, then a player such as Austin Reeves may not be as viable as he once was, because the second ball handler next to to LeBron, or now the primary ball handler next to LeBron, has been found with Luka, and so the value of Reeves on the Lakers in particular isn't as high as it once was. As a Laker fan, I hate to say that, but it's just the reality of what it is. And more importantly, Reeves was the player that a lot of teams were looking after when it comes to trading for a Miles Turner or a Walker Kessler. The Lakers obviously were unwilling to do so because how much value Reeves has on the roster as a second ball handler. But again, now having Luka on the team and not having a legitimate five, being able to move Reeves for someone that is desperately needed on this roster is something that I believe that this team is going to move in that direction for. They still have a pick. They still have Rui and other flexible contracts. I just believe it just makes the most sense. And on top of the fact that this team still looks really, really good. AD has not played in the past couple of games. They just got done playing a game, obviously without Anthony Davis, and they still looked really good against the Los Angeles Clippers. So there is a world where Luka and LeBron and a bunch of other wing defenders and three-point shooters still work out really, really well as long as they can get a five and add a little bit more to their defense, because of course the question around Luka is his defense. But adding a vertical threat could address some of the immediate concerns that a lot of people have for the Lakers post the AD trade, because the five spot, the lack of defense in the front court, something that is certainly questionable at this point. And I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant to figure out what the Lakers are going to look like post this trade. Now, keeping in the theme of the Luka Doncic trade moving out in Dallas, the Mavericks have already moved off of Quentin Grimes as I record this video, which was a bit of a head scratcher, but you know, that's another video for another day. However, I do find it very interesting how so many people are very optimistic about what this team is going to look like this year. I think many people may have forgotten that the Mavericks are already in the 11th seed and they have a lot of climbing to do. I do believe some of that can be addressed with potential buyout players or just making a couple of more tweaks to their roster. I do like the Caleb Martin addition to this team for the immediate success. However, if I were a Dallas Maverick fan, I'm just telling you right now, I wouldn't keep my hopes up too high this season. Daniel Gafford just went out. Derek Lively still isn't going to be available until the end of the regular season. Even if the Mavericks do make a huge push towards these last 20 to 30 games, I just don't know how much noise they can make, again, in a very competitive Western Conference, when a lot of the other teams that are a few games ahead of them are also making additions and trades and just changing their rosters all in all, with the Warriors, with the Spurs, with the Sacramento Kings. There's so many teams that are already making a lot of additions to their roster. It's going to be really hard for me to believe that the Mavericks are going to be able to make some significant push down the latter half of this regular season. So keep in mind that they could also make some changes as well, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough. I do believe that the Mavericks are going to be better suited for a complete restart of the season at the top of next year. But trying to make those shifts when you're this far along in the season and you're behind the 8-ball, really hard to see that map out. Other teams that be on the lookout still, apparently DeAndre Hunter could potentially be shipped off out in Atlanta. The same thing can be said about Clint Capella. The Hawks have a lot of young players that are shifting in and out of that lineup, and they have some type of financial commitments that need to be made as well. That's a big reason why a lot of these players are more than likely not going to be on this team long term, so that will be interesting. Also, the fact that Jalen Johnson is going to be out is also going to make things very interesting for Atlanta as well throughout the remainder of the season. Also, with so much changes being made, please continue to not rule out what's going on in Brooklyn. Again, Nick Claxton should be a very, very high top priority for the Lakers. Cam Johnson is still out there as well, and allegedly there is still conversations about what the Bulls are going to do with Vucevic and Lonzo Ball. Reports claiming that Lonzo could go for as little as a second-round pick. Be very mindful though that Lonzo's making around $20 million, and even though the box score doesn't really yell out impact player, because his defense passing and as long as he can get that three-point shot back, I do believe that Lonzo will be a great addition to a lot of teams in the NBA if they have a disposable contract that can match close to how much money he's making. There's still some noise around Valanciunas and Kyle Kuzma out in Washington. The Milwaukee Bucks are still trying to figure out a way to upgrade their roster, because even though they've turned it around towards the second half of this season, it still isn't really working out to the point where they can feel confident about going into the postseason run. So be on the lookout for some Chris Middleton shifts, and Bobby Portis' name has been brought up in conversations as well. I think a much bigger picture and a bigger problem with the Milwaukee Bucks is that eventually they're going to have to address the elephant in the room, and that is them replacing Brook Lopez, who's been so valuable to this team throughout the course of the Giannis era. But I do believe that's going to be a bit more interesting, and you really got to hold on to what they have going on out there in Milwaukee without giving up too many young players. And finally, if you're Minnesota, please do not waste a year of Anthony Edwards' career with Julius Randle on the roster. Make the trade, move wherever you need to move, but it would be just a complete and utter waste if Julius Randle finishes this season off as a Minnesota Timberwolf, because we all know that that is not going to work at the playoffs. We all know it's not going to work. Please go after someone that best suits that team, especially because we all know that when the offseason comes along, y'all are not signing Randle to any long-term deal. We know that. You can get a little bit more financial flexibility, but like going after a John Collins in contrast to where you were just last season with Karl Anthony Towns. But going into a offseason with Julius Randle still on your roster, knowing that he does not fit, to me is crazy. I think they should trade Randle ASAP. I just don't know why they're holding on to him. But with that being said, yo, that's a lot to go on. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell. And again, if you want to watch me react to all of the trades that are going on during the deadline, make sure you follow me on playback.tv/Lowe's Room. I will be there streaming all day long trade deadline. So check me out there. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.